Our first speaker is currently the staff attorney for the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. She's the mother of two, a runner, a traveler, and is always on board to try something new. Please welcome Rebecca St. George with her story, Gikanu Amaguinanag.
Aneen. Is that ready? Kinda? That is a picture of my dad. You're going to hear a little bit more about him later. His name's Bernie. I almost called this talk Feelin' the Burn, but then I thought that maybe this was a little more fancy. There it is. So one of the things that I learned growing up fairly consistently was that there's a lot of educated dummies out there. This was a message I got from my dad a lot. You can get a lot of schooling, and it doesn't make you smart. Don't think that it makes you smart. And get a lot of schooling, because it's really important, but it's not going to make you smart. And this is something I learned overtly. It's also something I learned by watching my parents. So that's my mom and dad early in their marriage. Two of the smartest people I know, right? Just very well read, very, they thought about things, they asked a lot of questions. My mom was a high school dropout. She had her first kid when she was 15. My dad had a high school education, worked 40-some years in the mines. Neither one of them had much of a formal education. But when I was growing up, no matter how broke we were, no matter if the mines were shut down, we didn't have any money, we always had at least 2 newspapers coming in. We always had a number of magazine subscriptions to news magazines. We always had books all over the house. Don't get me wrong, they did not disparage formal education. In fact, they pushed all of their children to get as much formal education as they could. So of their 6 kids, that's my mom and dad on the couch, that's their 6 kids. They have 2 of them have MBAs. There's a Master of Public Policy up there, Master of Theology, and that little girl on her daddy's lap there is a lawyer now. So how did they do it? That's the thing that I'm thinking about with this. What was their secret sauce? And the answer is, I have no idea. Right? Like, they were 2 people who were destined to fail. They were destined to have kids who didn't know anything, and all of their kids are doing pretty well at this point. So my mom was an amazing, intelligent, thoughtful woman. She still is. She's still alive. But tonight I'm going to focus a little on my dad's family history, partly because he passed away a little less than a year ago, so he's heavy on my mind. But it's partly because I think that his family history is an important piece of Twin Ports history. And I think that that history in our area needs a little more light. So my dad was Ojibwe. Oh, hi, Christina. He was enrolled with the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. I've been told that we were Fish Clan. And I've been told that the Fish Clan are the teachers and scholars, the advisors and philosophers, and that the Fish Clan sort of help solve problems. I would assume that that makes it pretty natural that dad and his kids would be pushed towards education and learning. But there were a lot of pieces of my dad's history to block that. My dad was raised by his grandparents. He always knew about his grandma's heritage. She was what they called in those days a half-breed from Fond du Lac. There were a lot of teachers in her family. Her family all came from this guy. He was a well-known headman in the Lake Superior area, Osage. He was a treaty signer of the 1854 treaty that was what founded the Fond du Lac Reservation. So when the BIA told my great-grandmother's father that her children needed to be sent away to the boarding schools, her father managed to finagle it so that they didn't have to go. He started his own school. They had their own little school over in Wisconsin. They trained their own teachers. They did their own thing. That was a good thing. There was some mixed blood privilege, I think, that went into that, a little bit of ingenuity, and it was helpful. My dad knew less about his grandfather, who was obviously an Indian guy, but he didn't talk about it. And he wasn't always such a great guy, from what I've heard. There's some stories. One story that I've learned is that when my dad was an adult, one day he was walking downtown in Superior with his grandpa, and they bumped into a woman that Dad didn't know. His grandpa stopped and started chatting with the woman in Ojibwe. My dad didn't know his grandpa knew Ojibwe, this man who'd raised him. Didn't know he was fluent, didn't know he had a connection. As they walked on, he asked his grandpa, who was that? His grandpa said, oh, that was whoever she was. I knew her from boarding school. My dad didn't know his grandpa had been to boarding school. So from this interaction, he learned that his grandpa was fluent in Ojibwe, that he'd gone to boarding school, that he was born on the White Earth Reservation, and that he'd been sent to the government boarding school in Tower, Minnesota when he was a child. His siblings were sent to school in Michigan and Wisconsin. So part of the goal of the Indian boarding school system, and I won't spend a lot of time in it, but part of the goal was to sort of take the Indian out, to kill the Indian, save the person, kill the Indian. And a way to do that was to separate families. The thing that a lot of people know about is you take the children away from their parents. But another piece of it was to also separate the siblings from each other, right? So that was kind of a rough thing. That's a picture of the boarding school up in Tower that apparently my great-grandfather went to. So Dad learned that when his grandpa was 14 years old, he ran away from the boarding school. He went back home to Superior, Wisconsin. So that's about 90 miles by today's roads. Back around the turn of the last century, through the woods, as a 14-year-old child, right? I'm thinking that school might not have been such a nurturing place. It might not have been such a good place to learn much. Maybe to learn that you need to get away, but not to learn the things maybe that they wanted to learn. Some of the children from some of the boarding schools. The fact that my great-grandfather spent the rest of his life largely denying that he was Indian, and in many ways finding many other unhealthy ways to exist, probably speaks volumes about his experience in the boarding school and the trails that he had to take to try to get away, to escape. So formal Western education hasn't always been good to my family, or to Indian families in general. In fact, at some level, formal education has been used as a tool to kill us, literally. A lot of the old boarding schools have cemeteries on site because of how many children died from that. But my dad still pushed us to get a lot of schooling. He still pushed us to learn a lot. And so it was complicated because go to school, get your degree, and question everything they tell you, right? I'd come home from school, and he'd always ask, what are you learning? What are they teaching you? What are they telling you? Right? It was sort of that, what are they telling you? And I'd say, oh, we're learning about manifest destiny. We're settling this great country. And my dad would give me another lecture. It was complicated. His favorite book was, he was a huge fan of Howard Zinn. His favorite book was a book called Lies My Teacher Told Me. He insisted all of his children read it. So Indian families everywhere have some complicated relationships with formal education. Boarding school experience is something that has touched every single Indian family in this country in some way. So many families who lost a generation or more of connection between parents and children, which is where most of our real learning takes place, right? We learn how to learn. We learn how to listen. We learn what's important at our parents' knees. And when children this age and younger are taken away from their parents, we lose our ability to learn our values from our parents. And so generations of Indian families have lost that. What's fun right now, at this point in history, I'm working out on the reservation, I live in Duluth, is watching our community start to reclaim a lot of that learning in a lot of wonderful ways, right? So the public schools haven't entirely figured it out. You can just look at our graduation rates. We're working on it, we're trying, and by we, I mean you all who are in the public schools, I'm not. But like my grandmother's family, my great-grandmother's family, It's also education, and learning is being reclaimed by Indian people in some real ways, like building our own schools, having our own schools, doing our own things. There's also a lot of other initiatives taking place on the reservation and in reservations all over the country. So some of the initiatives are formal, some are informal. For instance, that's a powwow at one of the schools. About 6 years ago, this couple, Jim and Pat Northrup, started a language camp out on the reservation. It's open to everyone, but it's 4 days of families getting together and learning traditional crafts and learning the language. And it's all steeped in sort of our values and our cultures and the way we do it. And it's finding the people who remember, or people who are learning, and people who are doing it. And it's really a beautiful thing. One year I was at that camp with my family, and my dad was there, my brother was there, and my brother's grandkids were there, my kids were there, and it was all just this wonderful, beautiful thing. And there's a lot of that going on all over the country. There's a really amazing group of women I've come to know. A couple of them are in the audience right now. It's a group of Native women in the area who've taken up endurance trail running. Started largely as a fight against obesity and diabetes, but it's turned into a group that does so much more, and I learn from them every time I get together with them. We educate each other about physical health, about our spiritual connections. We support each other in all of the messy, messy things that life throws us. And then we teach our children. And so sometimes the way we learn is by getting together with people where we feel nurtured and we feel loved. And sometimes part of that nurturing love is really freaking hard. And that's okay. Somebody mentioned something this last weekend to me, that we were doing a 25-kilometer run up at Lutsen. And she said, this is really hard, but this is what we do. This is the easy hard, she said. So we can push ourselves to do more. Oh, I'm going to leave that up there. Some of the other things happening, we have weekly language tables where people are reclaiming the Ojibwe language. We have classes at community centers that are teaching gardening and moccasin making and all the things that sort of we learn that we have stories with that help us go. And all of these initiatives are spearheaded by Indian people who are doctors, and artists and lawyers and parents and teachers and accountants and computer programmers and dentists and folks with little or no formal education sometimes. But holy cow, do those people ever know some stuff? And a lot of them know the stuff that we all need to learn. Miigwech.